Thomas Markle, 80 years old, recovering from multiple strokes and reportedly planning to walk down the aisle with his Filipina nurse girlfriend. That sentence alone contains enough drama to fuel an entire season of a reality show, yet for the Markle family, this is just another Tuesday. The news broke like a small earthquake through royal watching circles, with sources claiming Meghan is horrified and unhappy at the prospect of her estranged father finding love again. And honestly, the layers here are almost too rich to unpack in one sitting. Think about where we are right now. Thomas Markle has not spoken to his daughter in over 6 years. He watched her wedding to Prince Harry from a hospital bed after suffering a heart attack, then spent the years that followed giving interview after interview, pleading for contact, defending himself, attacking her, and generally keeping the family drama simmering on a permanent low boil. He has had strokes that left him with speech difficulties and mobility challenges. The man requires constant care, which is how his nurse entered the picture. Now that caretaker has apparently become something more, and the woman who once accused her father of betraying her is reportedly furious that he might actually be happy. This is not simply a story about an old man finding companionship in his twilight years. This touches on inheritance questions, family legacy, public image, and the uncomfortable reality that Meghan Markle has systematically cut off nearly every member of her biological family. Her father, her half-sister Samantha, her half-brother Thomas Jr., various aunts, uncles, and cousins who have spoken to the press over the years. All of them exist outside the carefully constructed world Meghan now inhabits. And now one of those exiled family members is threatening to add a new character to the cast, someone who might have her own story to tell. The timing could not be more loaded. Meghan and Harry are struggling to maintain relevance after their Netflix deal reportedly produced disappointing results. Their Spotify partnership ended with an executive calling them grifters. The couple who once commanded the global stage now finds themselves fighting for column inches against their own family members' romantic entanglements. If Thomas Markle remarries and his new wife decides to share her perspective on the family dynamics, Meghan loses another piece of the narrative she has worked so hard to control. But before we get ahead of ourselves speculating about what comes next, we need to understand how we arrived at this moment. Who is this woman who captured Thomas Markle's heart? What do we actually know about his health and his finances? And why would Meghan, a woman who famously married for love against considerable opposition, begrudge her own father the same happiness she claimed for herself? So who exactly is the woman at the center of this developing story? Details remain frustratingly scarce, which has not stopped speculation from running wild across social media and tabloid comment sections. What we know is this: she is a Filipina nurse who entered Thomas Markle's life in a professional capacity following his series of strokes. She was hired to help care for him, to manage his medications, to assist with the physical therapy and daily tasks that become overwhelming when your body starts failing you. Somewhere along the way, according to reports, the professional relationship evolved into something personal. The timeline matters here because it shapes how we interpret everything that follows. Thomas suffered a major stroke in May of 2022 that left him hospitalized and struggling to speak. Subsequent health episodes have kept him largely homebound in Rosarito, Mexico, where he has lived for years. When you are 80 years old and your health is failing and your famous daughter refuses to return your calls, loneliness becomes a constant companion. A nurse who shows up every day, who actually looks you in the eye and asks how you are feeling, who helps you through the mundane indignities of aging, that person becomes your lifeline. It would be strange if some emotional attachment did not form. That said, the optics here raise legitimate questions that deserve acknowledgement. The pattern of nurses or caretakers developing romantic relationships with elderly, wealthy patients is well documented enough to have its own category of legal scrutiny. I am not suggesting anything sinister is happening with Thomas Markle's girlfriend specifically because we simply do not have the evidence to make that claim. What I am saying is that the active invites scrutiny whether or not that scrutiny is fair. She holds the power in the relationship by virtue of being his caretaker. He depends on her in ways that create vulnerability. Courts have invalidated marriages and inheritance arrangements when these dynamics come into play. We do not know her name, at least not in confirmed reporting. We do not know her age, though the assumption is that she is clearly younger than Thomas. We do not know her immigration status, her family background, her motivations, or her feelings about suddenly being thrust into the periphery of one of the most watched family dramas on the planet. What we know is that she exists, that Thomas reportedly wants to marry her, and that Meghan's camp is apparently not pleased about any of it. The speculation machine, as always, fills the gaps with whatever narrative people find most satisfying, whether that means painting her as a gold digger or as a genuine source of comfort for a lonely old man. Until we know more, any characterization of this woman remains projection. But the story she represents, of caretaker romance and late-life marriage and family inheritance concerns, that story has been told 1,000 times before, and it rarely ends without conflict. What does it mean that Thomas Markle now needs this level of care in the first place, and how did his health deteriorate to this point? The heart attack that kept Thomas Markle from walking his daughter down the aisle in May of 2018 was not an isolated incident, but rather the first major warning sign of a body under severe stress. He had been caught staging paparazzi photos in the weeks before the wedding, a scandal that threw the entire Markle family active into the spotlight. The stress of that public humiliation, combined with what sources close to him described as genuine heartbreak over his fractured relationship with Meghan, culminated in a cardiac event that required immediate medical intervention. He underwent surgery to have stents placed in his arteries and watched his daughter marry Prince Harry from his hospital bed in Mexico. The years that followed brought additional health crises that compounded his physical decline. In late May of 2022, Thomas suffered a major stroke that initially left him unable to speak. He was rushed across the border from Mexico to a hospital in California, where he received emergency treatment. Reports indicated he had to write notes to communicate with medical staff because the stroke had affected his verbal abilities. A second stroke followed, further compromising his mobility and independence. By the time he stabilized, Thomas Markle was no longer the relatively strong 70-something who had done media interviews defending himself against accusations of betrayal. He was now a fragile 80-year-old who required round-the-clock assistance. This context matters when we assess the relationship with his nurse girlfriend, because dependency changes everything about how we interpret romantic attachment. Thomas cannot simply meet someone at a coffee shop or through mutual friends the way most people find partners. His world has shrunk to his home, his medical appointments, and the small circle of people who enter his daily life in professional capacities. When you eliminate most opportunities for human connection, the connections you do have carry enormous weight. His nurse became one of the few people he saw regularly, one of the few people who touched him with care rather than clinical detachment, one of the few people who listened to him talk about his life and his regrets, and his hope that maybe someday his daughter might call. The emotional vulnerability of an 80-year-old man in this position cannot be overstated. He has been publicly rejected by Meghan for over 6 years. He has watched her give interviews discussing her mental health struggles, her family trauma, her need to protect her peace, and he has recognized himself as one of the sources of pain she describes, even as he maintains that she misrepresents what happened between them. His other children have their own complicated relationships with fame and family. The grandchildren he has never met, Archie and Lilibet, exist only as images on television screens and magazine covers. His body is failing. His family is fractured. His legacy, such as it is, will forever be tied to the daughter who became a duchess and then walked away from him. In that context, a nurse who offers warmth and companionship is not just a romantic interest. She is proof that he still matters to someone. That framing does not excuse any potential manipulation or exploitation if such dynamics exist, and it does not mean the relationship is above scrutiny, but it does remind us that Thomas Markle is not simply a villain in Meghan's story or a victim in his own. He is a complicated, wounded, lonely old man grasping at whatever happiness he can find before his time runs out. The question is whether his daughter can see him that way, and based on the reported reaction, the answer appears to be no. So Meghan is reportedly horrified and unhappy about her father's romantic plans, and that phrasing alone tells us something interesting about how she views this situation. Horrified is a strong word, the kind of word you use when something genuinely shocks or disgusts you. It is not the word you use when you hear that your estranged elderly father found a companion. The intensity of that reported reaction raises questions about what exactly Meghan finds so objectionable, and the possible answers reveal more about her than about Thomas. The most obvious concern involves inheritance and financial implications for her children. Thomas Markle reportedly earned money over the years through paid interviews and selling access to his story. Whatever assets he has accumulated, whether that amounts to a modest retirement fund or something more large, would presumably go to his children upon his death. If he marries again, his new wife would likely have legal claims to those assets that could supersede or complicate what Archie and Lilibet might otherwise receive from their maternal grandfather. Now, Meghan and Harry are reportedly worth tens of millions of dollars, so the idea that she would be concerned about a relatively small inheritance seems almost petty. But money has a way of mattering even to people who have plenty of it, especially when principle is involved. There is also the matter of public embarrassment and narrative control. Meghan has worked hard to position herself as the wounded party in the family drama, the daughter who tried to include her father in her happiness, only to be betrayed by his staged photos and subsequent media appearances. Every interview Thomas gives, every headline he generates, threatens to complicate that narrative by presenting his perspective in ways she cannot control. A wedding would bring press coverage, photographs, possibly even a documentary or tell-all book from the new wife. The girlfriend has seen Thomas at his most vulnerable, has heard his side of every story, and has no loyalty to Meghan whatsoever. She represents a narrative time bomb that could detonate at any moment. And then there is the irony that practically screams from this situation. Meghan Markle married for love against the objections of an institution, a family, and a country that questioned whether she belonged. She positioned that marriage as romantic and brave, a triumph of the heart over tradition and expectation. Harry chose her despite pressure to do otherwise, and she has celebrated that choice as proof that love conquers all. Now her father is making a similar choice, pursuing romance in the face of what will certainly be skepticism and opposition, and Meghan's reported response is horror rather than understanding. The double standard deserves acknowledgement. If Meghan can marry whomever she wants regardless of family opinion, so can Thomas. If she can prioritize her own happiness over her family's concerns, so can he. If she can cut off relatives who she believes have wronged her, then he can build new relationships with people who treat him well. The rules she claims for herself apply to everyone, including the father she has not spoken to in 6 years. Her reported reaction suggests she does not see it that way, that her father's choices remain subject to her judgment even as her own choices are beyond question. That asymmetry reveals something fundamental about how Meghan views her place in the family hierarchy, as the center around which everyone else should orient. The estrangement between Meghan and Thomas Markle has become one of the most publicly dissected family ruptures in recent memory, and adding a new romantic partner to the mix only deepens wounds that never properly healed. The original sin, in Meghan's telling, was the staged paparazzi photos that emerged before her wedding in 2018. Thomas had arranged for a photographer to capture seemingly candid images of him preparing for his daughter's big day, being fitted for a suit, looking at photographs of Meghan and Harry, reading books about British royalty. When those photos were exposed as staged, the embarrassment was genuine and the betrayal felt real. Meghan reportedly stopped communicating with her father shortly thereafter, and they have not spoken since. Thomas has offered his perspective in interview after interview over the years, painting himself as a father who made a mistake under pressure and has been paying for it ever since. He claims he staged the photos because he was tired of being portrayed negatively by paparazzi who had been camping outside his home. He wanted to present a more flattering image of himself, and he made a poor decision that spiraled out of control. He has apologized publicly multiple times. He has begged for contact with his daughter, with his grandchildren, with anyone who might serve as a bridge. He has also, it must be said, continued giving paid interviews criticizing Meghan and Harry, which rather undercuts the reconciliation pitch. Meghan's perspective, as articulated in her Oprah interview and various court documents, is that her father's media appearances constitute ongoing betrayal that makes reconciliation impossible. She cannot trust him to keep private matters private. She cannot expose herself to further hurt by opening the door he keeps knocking on. She has chosen to protect her peace, her family, her mental health, by maintaining distance from someone who has demonstrated repeatedly that he will share their business with the press. From her position, the estrangement is not punitive but protective. Neither side has clean hands in this ongoing conflict, and the new romance adds another layer of complication to an already impossible situation. If Thomas marries his nurse girlfriend, he creates a new family unit that exists entirely outside Meghan's orbit. His new wife will have opinions about the estrangement, will perhaps encourage Thomas to keep speaking publicly, or perhaps encourage him to let go and enjoy his remaining years in peace. She might want her own moment in the spotlight, or she might prefer privacy. Every possibility represents a variable Meghan cannot control, and control, more than anything else, seems to be what the Duchess of Sussex requires from her relationships. The wound between father and daughter may never heal now. Too many years have passed, too many words have been spoken publicly that cannot be taken back. Too much resentment has calcified into permanent estrangement. Thomas finding love again does not solve any of those problems. It simply adds another person to the list of people outside Meghan's inner circle who have access to information she might prefer remain private. The question now is whether this new relationship will prompt another round of public warfare or whether both sides will finally accept that reconciliation is not coming. Samantha Markle, Meghan's half-sister and most vocal family critic, will certainly have something to say about their father's romantic news, and predicting her response requires understanding the role she has carved out in this ongoing drama. Samantha has spent years positioning herself as the family spokesperson, the truth teller, who will not be silenced by her famous half-sister's public relations machine. She wrote a book called The Diary of Princess Pushy's Sister that Meghan's lawyers successfully argued contained defamatory content. She has filed a lawsuit against Meghan that is working its way through the legal system. She has given countless interviews painting Meghan as a social climber who abandoned her family on the way up. Given that history, Samantha's initial response to Thomas's relationship will probably be publicly supportive. She positions herself as the loyal daughter who has stood by their father through his health crises and public humiliations. She has accompanied him to medical appointments, helped manage his media appearances, and generally served as his defender in the court of public opinion. Supporting his happiness, whatever form it takes, aligns with the image she cultivates of herself as the good daughter, in contrast to Meghan's abandonment. But there are layers beneath that likely public support that could create tension over time. Samantha presumably has her own expectations about inheritance and family legacy. A new stepmother changes the calculus in ways that affect her, not just Meghan. If the new wife encourages Thomas to pull back from media appearances, Samantha loses her platform for commenting on royal family drama. If the marriage produces legal documents that redirect assets or decision-making authority, Samantha's position as Thomas's primary family support might be challenged. These possibilities probably will not surface immediately, but family dynamics around elderly parents and new spouses have a way of revealing fractures that were not visible before. There is also the question of whether Samantha sees opportunity in this development. Another chapter of family drama means another round of interview requests, another chance to weigh in on Meghan's reaction, another opportunity to stay relevant in a media scene that would otherwise forget about her. Samantha has demonstrated a willingness to use family connection for publicity, and her father's wedding would provide ample material. She might genuinely support his happiness while simultaneously recognizing the media value of commenting on it extensively. The broader family dynamics could shift in unpredictable ways depending on how the new girlfriend integrates into Thomas's life. Does she want relationships with his other children, or does she prefer to keep her own counsel? Will she encourage Thomas to continue speaking publicly about Meghan, or will she suggest he move on and enjoy whatever time remains? Her influence over Thomas, both as a caretaker and as a romantic partner, gives her considerable power to shape the final chapters of this family story. Samantha, who has spent years cultivating her own influence over the family narrative, may find herself competing with an unexpected rival for their father's ear. The financial dimensions of this potential marriage deserve direct examination because they underlie much of the reported concern from Meghan's camp. Thomas Markle reportedly earned money through various media arrangements over the years, though the exact amounts remain unclear. Paid interviews with major networks, photograph licensing deals, consulting arrangements with tabloids seeking inside information about his daughter, all of these presumably generated income during the peak years of public interest in the Meghan and Harry saga. What he has done with that money, how much remains, and what obligations or plans exist for its distribution are questions without public answers. What we can say is that Thomas Markle is not a wealthy man by the standards of the world his daughter now inhabits. He worked as a lighting director in Hollywood for decades, a union job that paid well but did not create generational wealth. His home in Rosarito, Mexico reflects a comfortable retirement rather than lavish prosperity. The medical bills from his strokes and ongoing care needs presumably consume a major portion of whatever resources he has. If there is a large estate to fight over, it would represent accumulated savings and media earnings rather than family money or professional success at the highest levels. The uncomfortable conversation about elderly men, clearly younger caretakers, and financial vulnerability applies here whether or not we want to engage with it. Courts regularly see cases where family members challenge marriages or financial decisions made by elderly people under the influence of romantic partners who entered their lives in professional capacities. The concern is not that every such relationship is exploitative, but that the dynamics create opportunities for exploitation that deserve scrutiny. An 80-year-old man with health problems, a famous daughter who has rejected him, and accumulated assets of unknown value represents exactly the profile that would attract attention from people looking to take advantage. I want to be clear that we have no evidence Thomas Markle's girlfriend is motivated by anything other than genuine affection. The relationship may be entirely authentic, a late-life romance between two people who found each other through circumstance and discovered real connection. Love happens in unexpected places and at unexpected times, and there is no age limit on companionship. Thomas deserves the benefit of the doubt until facts emerge that suggest otherwise. But Meghan's reported concern about this marriage probably includes financial considerations, whether or not she would articulate them publicly. The children she shares with Harry have some potential claim to whatever Thomas leaves behind, and a new wife would complicate that claim considerably. The money question also illuminates the transactional undercurrents of the entire Markle family drama. Thomas gave paid interviews, Samantha wrote a book and filed a lawsuit. Various relatives have sold their stories over the years. The family has in many ways commodified their connection to Meghan in ways she finds distasteful and that she has worked hard to escape. Her own commercial ventures, the Netflix deal and the Spotify partnership and the various brand collaborations exist on a different scale, but follow a similar logic. Everyone in this story is trying to use their proximity to fame for financial benefit. The new girlfriend, if she eventually tells her story, will simply be the latest to join that pattern. Public perception of this story splits predictably along the fault lines that have defined Meghan Markle commentary since she first entered public life. Royal watchers who have soured on the Duchess see karma in her reported distress. She cut off her father, the logic goes, and now she has to watch him find happiness without her. She positioned herself as the victim of family dysfunction, and now her reaction to her father's joy exposes her as controlling and hypocritical. The comment sections under articles about this story overflow with variations on the same theme. Meghan made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. The opposing camp, smaller but no less vocal, argues that Thomas Markle forfeited any claim to his daughter's goodwill through his repeated betrayals. The staged photos were bad enough, but his subsequent decision to keep giving paid interviews, to keep airing family business publicly, to keep seeking attention at Meghan's expense, demonstrated a pattern that justified her withdrawal. From this perspective, her reported reaction to his marriage plans reflects legitimate concern about what his new wife might do with the access and information she has gained through the relationship. The girlfriend has witnessed Thomas at his most vulnerable and has presumably heard his uncensored thoughts about Meghan, Harry, and the grandchildren he has never met. That material has value in the tabloid marketplace, and Meghan's concern about its potential use is reasonable rather than controlling. Social media amplifies both narratives without resolving the underlying questions. Royal fan accounts share the story with crying laughing emojis and declarations that Meghan deserves whatever unhappiness this brings her. Supporters post threads about elder care exploitation and the documented pattern of caretakers targeting vulnerable patients. Neither side engages seriously with the complexity of the situation, preferring the satisfactions of partisan commentary to the discomfort of acknowledging that everyone involved might have legitimate grievances and serious flaws. A useful thought experiment: how would this story play if it were Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, who had found a new romantic partner after years as a single woman? The coverage would certainly be different. Doria has maintained her silence throughout the entire Meghan saga, refusing interviews, avoiding cameras, keeping whatever opinions she holds about her daughter's choices completely private. If she announced a relationship, the reaction from Meghan would presumably be celebration rather than horror. The different response reveals what actually bothers Meghan about her father's romance. It is not that he is finding happiness. It is that his happiness comes with potential consequences she cannot control. Meghan has demonstrated a consistent pattern of cutting off family members who do not align with her preferred narrative. Her father, her half-siblings, various extended relatives have all found themselves outside her inner circle after real or perceived betrayals. The pattern suggests that loyalty, as Meghan defines it, requires silence and deference rather than independent judgment or public commentary. Thomas has failed that test repeatedly. His new girlfriend, whoever she is, has not yet had the opportunity to fail it. But if she eventually speaks publicly about what she has witnessed, she will join the list of people Meghan has determined to be toxic influences who must be excluded from her life. So where does this story go from here? Thomas Markle has shown no indication that he cares what Meghan thinks about his personal choices, and why would he? She has not spoken to him in over 6 years. She did not call when he had his strokes. She has not introduced him to his grandchildren. Whatever influence she once had over his decisions evaporated long ago, replaced by the bitter recognition that his daughter has written him out of her life and has no intention of writing him back in. Her reported displeasure about his relationship will not stop him from pursuing it. My prediction is that Thomas will move forward with the marriage regardless of the controversy it generates. He is 80 years old with serious health problems and a limited horizon. The prospect of spending whatever time remains with someone who has shown him kindness and affection outweighs abstract concerns about family dynamics or public perception. He has already lost Meghan in every way that matters. Losing her approval of his romantic choices costs him nothing. He's still possessed. The marriage, if it happens, will trigger another round of media attention that keeps this family drama alive when it might otherwise have faded. The new wife will receive interview requests offering large payments for her inside perspective on Thomas, on his relationship with Meghan, on what he has said privately about the estrangement. Whether she accepts those offers will depend on factors we cannot predict from the outside, including her own values, her financial situation, and whatever understanding she and Thomas reach about privacy. But the tabloid marketplace rewards disclosure, and the temptation will be real. The grandchildren question looms over any potential reconciliation calculus. If Thomas remarries, does that change anything about whether Meghan might eventually allow him to meet Archie and Lilibet? The cynical answer is no, because the estrangement never depended on his marital status. The more complicated answer is that a new wife might influence Thomas in ways that either facilitate or further prevent any future contact. If she encourages him to stop giving interviews and focus on private happiness, perhaps the temperature drops enough for back-channel communication. If she becomes another voice amplifying grievances publicly, the walls around Meghan's family only grow higher. What we are witnessing is the final act of a family tragedy that has played out on the global stage for nearly a decade. The Harry who stood at the altar in Windsor in 2018, beaming as his bride walked toward him, believed he had found someone worth sacrificing everything else to be with. He gave up his country, his family, his friends, his military identity, his place in the institution that defined his entire life. What he received in exchange was Meghan's version of freedom, which increasingly looks like isolation dressed up as independence. His father-in-law, the man he never met, now seeks his own version of late-life happiness, and Meghan, according to reports, is horrified by the prospect. This family's wounds may never heal publicly. Too much has been said, too much has been broadcast, too much has been monetized for anyone to simply move on and pretend the conflicts never happened. Thomas Markle seems determined to find happiness in whatever time he has left, with or without his daughter's blessing. And Meghan, thousands of miles away in her Montecito mansion, apparently cannot let even that small piece go uncontested. The comment section is yours. Tell me where you stand, and subscribe for the next update.